Well, hey, you, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Hippie Podcast. I'm your host, Michaela. I'm here with Tank and Willie the Corgi. And today I want to talk about the concept, remember who you are. One of my goals with everything that I do, whether it's this podcast or content that I put out on my social media channels, books I write, is to actually give you tangible tools to and tangible how-tos to the things that most people just say. And why this is such a big goal of mine is because I would get so frustrated when I was at a point where I knew I needed help, but nobody was telling me how to actually help myself. I was looking for the help. I knew something was wrong. I knew there was a disconnect, but I wasn't actually being told how to do it. And that's really the journey I've been on, is to learn how and then to also teach how. Because we'll see these quotes. I always just call them like cute little Instagram quotes, but they're really all over social media of do the work, remember who you are, stay positive, don't let anyone disturb your peace, protect your peace, all of these things. And I remember when I was at that point where I was just so frustrated, I'm like, how? Obviously, like freaking obviously, but how? And that's when I really took it upon myself. You know what? I'll go fucking figure it out. I'll go figure it out. I'll go talk to God. I'll go pray. I'll go experiment. I'll go do whatever I've got to do. I'll go figure out how. I'm actually going to teach people how to do it, because it's one of those things that, and I learned this lesson a few months ago of, when someone's seeking help, we just don't know what to do. It's like, okay, I'm going to you for help, but then oftentimes the people that are offering help don't actually know how they help themselves. And so how do we actually turn this into a tangible, like step-by-step process? And that is what I want to help you do today with this concept of remember who you are. Yes, of course, be who we are, but how? And then why have we forgotten who we are? Why have we abandoned ourselves? A lot of us just don't understand, and it's so confusing and it's so just maddening, quite honestly. And I'm going to get off my tangent because I can go on and on about the problems, but we know the problems, we're aware of the problems. Now let's actually get into the solutions. And so the concept itself, remember who you are. The first thing is, how did we forget who we are? And to simplify it, it really boils down to trauma. And I consider trauma anything that has separated us from our truth. And this could be something what I call a flat tire trauma. And when I call it a flat tire trauma, I mean anything that stopped us in our tracks immediately. So these are the things that we usually consider: death of a loved one, divorce of our parents, having to move, sexual assault, sexual abuse. These are the big things that just stop us in our tracks. Where the check engine light traumas are a little bit more mischievous, but will still cause our car, aka our person, to break down eventually. So these are the little things we dismiss, and then all of a sudden we have an anxiety attack. All of a sudden we have crippling back pain to where we can't even get out of bed. All of a sudden we have a mental breakdown that we just can't shake. And those are more the check engine light traumas, these little seemingly minor things turn into a major thing. And so these things happen, and we decide, in order to stay safe, we abandon a piece of ourselves and we start becoming someone that we're not, from the goal of keeping ourselves safe and protected and accepted by the tribe. This is a very primitive part of the brain. And so step by step, and then it's just, I always think of that metaphor of, if someone moves you from the goalpost 100 steps at a time, you're going to say, no, I'm not doing that. But if someone's like, hey, do you mind just taking a step? Oh yeah, not a big deal. And then a couple years, days, whatever later, oh, do you mind just taking another step? Oh yeah, no problem. Now, when you go step by step, 100 steps away from who you are, it's not as shocking to our system. It's not as obvious. And so we do it, right? And this could be as little as, our parents not, knowing the difference. And so they tell us like, oh, it's polite to do this. It's polite. But a lot of times in being polite and trying to be a good person and quote unquote, we end up abandoning and trying to please other people. It really does boil down to Oprah's disease to please, in how Oprah says the disease to please. And then one trying to please something at a time and trying to protect ourselves at a time. Now we're so far away from ourselves, we don't even remember who we are in the first place. And that's how that concept gets created. And so now that we know like how this gets created, what's interesting as I've learned along my journey, trauma is not changing who you are, or trauma work is not changing who you are. Trauma work is becoming who you are and being who you are, not having to protect yourself and feeling safe to be who you are. So now that we know these trauma instances have now separated and created this circumstance of forgetting who we are, how do we remember who we are? Well, this is where the how to do the work. This is where the trauma work, and I'm putting my fingers in quotation marks, this is where this comes in. So the cool thing is we can use anything in our lives to start to remember who we are. And one of my favorite ways to do this is actually through watching movies and going to watch the movies where our favorite character plays in, because sometimes our favorite characters aren't in our favorite movies and, vice versa. So specifically, I want you to think about a movie that has your favorite character. So it doesn't necessarily need to be your favorite movie. This is one of my favorite movies, but like Top Gun Maverick is one of my favorite movies. And specifically Maverick is one of my favorite characters. In TV, The Blacklist is one of my favorite shows because Raymond Reddington is one of my favorite characters. And so I'm going to start, and this is what I want you to do as well. Start finding these favorite characters that you have and start finding the traits within them, and specifically the traits that you believe you don't have. But here's the thing. We cannot see in other people that which we do not know in ourselves. The reason I love Raymond Reddington is not all the reasons that everybody else loves Raymond Reddington, but the reasons that I do is because he is reflecting a part in me that I have. And so I'll just go with Reddington. And actually, I have the Blacklist on in the background right now, so I'm looking at him. But one of the things, and this is actually the same quality that I love about Ethan Hunt in Mission Impossible, Maverick, and Top Gun, specifically Top Gun Maverick, more so than the original Top Gun, is when everything else, and this is kind of the Mission Impossible concept, when everything else seems impossible, they find a freaking way. And that is something in the last few years I have deeply forgotten about myself, that no matter what, I always find a way. No matter what, I can always figure it out. And that is something I have forgotten about myself through self-doubt. I felt really defeated over a couple situations. And from that feeling of defeat, from that trauma, again, I felt defeated and started to think about myself like, oh, I can't figure it out. I don't have this, like, because for me personally, when it comes to like career and very tangible stuff, I feel very capable. But when it comes to like relationships and like my love life, I don't. And so I overlook that a lot, and I start beating myself over that a lot. And because I'm beating myself up in that one category of life, I now feel it in every area of my life. And so then now watching these shows and starting to reconnect to that, I can also apply it to the area of my life where I feel really defeated and can start remembering who I am in that category of life as well. And so that is one way we can start to remember who we are. We go find our favorite characters. We find the qualities that we have forgotten about ourselves that they innately have in them. Because again, we can only see in others that which we know in ourselves. And then we ask ourselves, one, when did we separate ourselves from this event? So, like I just said, for me, it was I think it was really when I realized the person I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with. Like, it was the moment that I realized him and I were not getting back together. Like, I didn't really beat myself up over not figuring it out until there was that moment of realizing he had like dated some people in between, like when him and I dated. And I always knew they wouldn't work. I was like, nah, no, okay, whatever. Like, go be young and whatever. Like, we'll find our way back together kind of when we're done being young and dumb. That was the story I was telling myself. And then when he got together with his now fiance, I knew I actually had known her longer than I'd known him. And I just knew they would work. And so that was kind of my reconciliation moment of, oh, I've got to heal. I really had prolonged the healing of how bad it hurt when him and I separated. I really had prolonged that, telling myself the story of, oh, we're going to get back together. And so then when they got together, that was when I really had to face, oh, okay, I got to heal from this situation. I just have a really weird tickle in my throat. And I don't know if that's because I said that out loud and I needed to. Man, and maybe it's because I've been fighting these emotions and they're just trying to come up in any way. That's one thing about emotions is if you crack the door, they're going to come up because, we suppress them and we shove them and we bury them. And then when we just open the door and they're like, okay, finally, this bitch is going to let us out, they're just going to like barge right on through. And so maybe that's partially, you guys going to hear me be a little emotional today, but I wasn't planning on. But that was really the reconciliation moment of like, I've got to heal from this thing. And it was at that moment that I started beating myself up over feeling like a failure, specifically feeling like a failure with him, because it was like the one person I always thought would be in my life. And so then really feeling like a failure that the one person I thought would always be in my life is just not. And because I felt like a failure in that area of my life, it bled into every other area of my life. And now, is that innately true? No, but here's how we really start to forget who we are. We confuse what is true versus what we feel to be true, because the conscious mind that is in charge of 5 to 10% of our brain, that's what we think to be true. What we feel to be true is in the subconscious mind, which is in charge of 95%, 90 to 95% of our daily experiences. So we can think something all day long, but if we don't feel it, what's going to be more powerful, 90 to 95% or 5 to 10%? Well, I don't have to answer that question for you, correct? And so is it objectively true that because I failed with him, I am a failure in relationships? No, that's not objectively true. Consciously, I know that is not true. But do I feel that statement is true? I do. And so now, specifically for me, where did I abandon this Reddington part of myself of I can figure anything out, I can do, whatever. Where did I abandon that part of myself? Well, it was in this situation with this man. And I was like, okay, so now I need to go feel the feelings. I need to go heal the feelings. So, if you know where the trauma is, like where you separated from yourself, go to that memory. If you don't, just get quiet, do some some breaths, like really drop into your body. And however old you are, so I'm 29, I would ask myself, at what age did this occur? And I would just go with my first gut instinct. So whatever age comes up for you, I want you to go with it, even if it doesn't make sense. And even if that's not the core wound, there's a reason your subconscious mind told you that age. So I just want you to stay curious and go with it. And so, okay, now I know, now I want to actually get more clear on the feelings. Okay, I feel like a failure. I feel defeat. I feel unlovable for sure. Let's see. Trying to think if we'll go with that. We'll go with like a failure and defeat. Probably unlovable too. And now we've got where we're at, the feeling of unlovable, and we have where we want to go, of that feeling of being unstoppable. That's like, and now we're going to fill in the gap. So the first thing we want to do is actually release the emotions. We want to release the defeat. We want to release the doubt. And we can do that in several ways. A spiritual guidance session where we go into the memory, like release that part of the subconscious. We can, if you look up Dr. Bradley Nelson on YouTube, specifically the emotion code, you can actually release those emotions with a magnet. So we want to release those emotions. And then once we get the emotions released, the way that we fill in the gap is we start to rewire the brain. So what do I want to believe about myself? What do you want to believe about yourself? And we actually know that, right? Because we have found our favorite characters and we have found the quality. So that's what we want to believe and what we want to feel is that. So for me, that unstoppable. Um, and really for me, if I go even a click deeper, it's like I want to reintegrate that I can figure anything out, that I can do what most people would seem to be impossible. So I really want to restore the belief of I can figure anything out. And so we need evidence of that, right? We can say something all day long, but we actually have to feel it and see it to be true. Because again, conscious mind speaks in words, subconscious mind speaks in feelings and images. So we want to start writing, recalling, and emotionally connecting to the memories. So for me, when I get done with this, I'm actually going to go eat lunch. But when I get done with this, I'm going to go eat lunch and then I'm going to journal all the times that I figured stuff out. So even for me, I'm designing a book cover for somebody right now. I taught myself Adobe Illustrator. I locked myself in a room and I figured it out. Did I have friends that I called to figure it out? Of course, but ultimately I decided I am going to figure this out. So I sat there and I figured it out. I website design. I needed a website, didn't want to pay for it to get done. And I always thought it would be a skill that I would need at some point and wanted. There was like a really strange noise outside. I don't know if you guys heard that, but I don't know where that came from, but anyway, we're just going to keep talking. And so it always I'm like, where did that come from? But anyway, because I'm like, I have everything on silent. So I don't know if someone was honking their horn outside or what was going on, but oh, there's someone must be riding their motorcycles. That's what it sounds like. Okay. Anyway, I have the window cracked and it's just kind of an odd. Okay. So anyway, now I'm going to go stack the evidence of when I know that to be true. So back to the website. And this was during the WordPress era. Like this was almost 10 years ago now, which is insane. We didn't have Squarespace and all of these website builders. So I sat down and I used a builder, but ultimately I figured it out. And the big thing that I've never really given myself credit for, there was a local girl who needed money to go get treatment outside of the US for cancer. And, it's one of those things we always say, like, give credit where my mom has this really beautiful saying about giving credit where credit is due. What's interesting, though, is we'll give everyone outside of ourselves credit, but we never give ourselves the credit that is actually due. And so in this situation, I never gave myself credit for what I did for this fundraiser, when in reality, we raised $48,000 in 2 weeks. I created the fundraiser. I came up with the idea. Could it have been possible to reach as many people as we reached without the help of other people? Absolutely not. And I'm still the one that created the group to ask for help. I'm still the one that did all of those things. And so giving ourselves that credit, but even as I'm saying that back to the conscious mind, I know that to be true, but I don't feel that to be true. So as I'm writing down these evidence, I'm going to want to write it down until I actually feel the truth in that and start feeling how capable I am again, and helping my friends with it, like whatever it is, and really start reconnecting to that feeling of I am capable. And so it takes 60 times to rewire the brain. And so we need to actually feel and emotionally connect with the evidence that we're stacking up for ourselves at least 60 times. And so when people ask, like, how long do I need to do it? We need to do it until it becomes automatic, what's called like a non-declarative memory, which means it would be a foreign thought to think that I'm not capable, but it would be my dominant thought to think that I am capable. So how long do I need to do this for? How long do you need to do this for? It's until the dominant thought is what you want to think about yourself, and the foreign thought is what you used to think about yourself. And so for some people, it's going to be 30 days. So for some, 60, 90, 6 months. And it also really depends on like how far this is in. I will say the more you can release the emotion, the quicker it is going to be to rewire this part of the brain. And okay, so I just want to recap. How did we forget who we are? Trauma. How do we remember who we are? We start looking for things that are reflecting who we truly are. For today's scenario, we used movies as an example, but you can use your TV shows, you can use a book character, you can use your favorite motivational speaker. It's something that you notice about the world in a positive light, because again, you would only notice it if it was truly innate within you. Then the third thing is we're going to release the emotion that created the separation in the trauma in the first place: doubt, defeat, fear, anger, sadness, the need for safety. And then we're going to bridge the gap between where we're at and then where we want to go, which is going to be through rewiring this part of the brain. And then we are going to do that until the thought that we want to think is the dominant thought, and what we used to think is foreign and just almost non-existent. Not that it won't come back, but when it does come back, you just kind of laugh and like, huh, that's funny. Like, we're not our thoughts. And so one of my favorite sayings is from a spiritual teacher, meditation teacher I listen to called Master Ko. And I believe he actually got this from his teacher, Master Cho. And it was, I'm not the body, I'm not the thoughts, I'm not the emotions, I am the soul, the spiritual self. I am one with God, I am one with all. There is only oneness. That is who we are. We are the soul part of ourselves. We are not all of these things. And so when we have that thought, it's like, oh, that's interesting. Where do you come from? Okay, get out of here. Like, shoo fly, don't bother me. And when we have that and we don't believe that thought, that is when we really take our power back. And so those are my steps for remembering who you are and how we have forgot who we are. If you have any questions, please reach out to me at michaelalpollock@gmail.com. You can send me an email. I'm currently off Instagram. I'm off social media. I got for at least 10 days for my intuition. And that, before we really close out the show, that is another thing that will cause us to forget who we are, is we're more distracted by the noise than we are the signal. So the signal is our soul. The signal is God. The noise is all of these distractions within our society, within our culture, our phones, like all of these things. And so intuitively, I was very confused by some things and was very, just was feeling very lost, honestly. There's some stuff I'd been avoiding that really needed to come up, and I knew that the only way for me to get the answer was to quiet the noise. And so I'm on a social media fast and really just trying to get quiet and really tune back into the signal. So even if you have no idea where to start, just start there. Carve out some quiet silence for yourself, 20 to 30 minutes a day, whether it's turning all the music off in the car, whether it's just sitting in the bath and closing your eyes. And whatever bubbles up is not true. Whatever bubbles up is trying to be released. And so when you feel that overwhelming sensation come up, because a lot of times when we're quiet, again, like what I said earlier, when emotions just take, well, whatever chance they can to get out the door, that's what the silence is. The silence is the cracking of the door and these emotions being given permission to release. So when you start to feel agitated and anxious in the silence, it's because all these things you've been trying to store and put away for a long time is trying to come up to free you from them. And so just to remind yourself, like, it's coming up to get out has been really helpful for me of why all of these things like bubble up. And that was something that a message that I had got from God, because I really thought that, I was doing, and I am doing better on a lot of things for sure. I was in a dark hole a couple of years ago and I've really come out of that space. Um, but when I got the message of, can you be alone with yourself and be content? Because if the answer is no, you're not actually content. And that was when I really realized I have to like dive back into the silence and the stillness and the quiet and hear this signal, whether it's God or these whispers in the dark of things that are trying to come out that I've been avoiding through distraction, whether it's my phone or, for me, I'll focus on other people's problems. So I avoid my own problems. And so even with the steps that I gave you today, if those aren't fully where you're at, just carving out some silence for yourself and tuning back into the signal, going and doing something you love is the perfect place to start. So I hope this episode was helpful. I, again, just took a couple weeks off from the show, wanted to come back with something that was really tangible and something you could apply to your life today. I appreciate you. I appreciate you tuning in to another episode of the Western Hippie Podcast. Willie, Tank, and I will talk to you next week. Take care. And I still got to come up with a good sign off. So I'm going to go with Tigger's TTFN, ta ta for now. Yeah, there we go.